You can have a perfect research topic, the right sample size, a well-designed questionnaire, but if your sampling technique is wrong, your entire study can fall apart. Which is why in today's video, we are not only going to define what a convenience sampling is, but I am going to show you when it is right for your research and when you should avoid it. Now let's start with a simple example. You want to conduct a study in a hospital. So you need participants, right? And those participants could be patients. Now, you don't have money to be traveling to all the hospitals around. You don't have the time as well. And you don't even have a complete list of those patients. So at this point, what do? You collect data from the participants, from the patients who are easiest to reach. That is what we call a convenience sampling. Instead of spending weeks trying to look for participants, you just use the people who are easier for you to access. It could be patients in a clinic, it could be students in your class, it could be nurses on the same shift as you. That is what we call a convenience sampling, from the term convenience. People who are easy for you to reach, easy for you to access. So in simple terms, convenience sampling means selecting participants because they are easy to reach. And here's a quick question for you. You want to conduct a study. So you created a Google form and then you pasted the link on your class WhatsApp group. Now, the people who are available or who saw it completed the questionnaire. What sampling method are you using? Definitely, that is a convenience sampling because you just recruited people who are easiest to reach. Because, for example, if you say that you want to chase every nursing student or you want to get the list of every nursing student, it's going to be hard for you. So you rather do what is convenient for you. Now let's talk about why we love convenience sampling, because I love it as well. And the number one reason is because it is cheap. Because by the time you start running around looking for your participants, you get to spend money. So that cost is no longer going to count when you're using a convenience sampling. And then the second one is it is easy. You don't need to stress looking for participants to come and participate. You only send it to a class WhatsApp group and whoever is available, and just fill your questionnaire. And then another thing is you don't need anyone's permission to access a complete list of your participants. Because if you are using a different technique, you would need a complete list of your participants. In fact, sometimes it is the only realistic option. And this is where you get into trouble. Because you think, okay, since it is easy to collect data using this technique, it must also represent everyone in your population. And this is where we need to slow down, because it is not always like that. Now, to point out some of the biggest mistakes that we make while using this sampling technique, let's look at this example. You want to conduct a study in a hospital. So you went to that hospital on a Monday morning and interviewed patients that came in. And then by 2 p.m. you are done. You packed your things and went back home. Your data collection is complete. Now think about it carefully. Who did you actually include in that interview? Who did you actually collected data from? Probably it's patients who have morning appointments only. So now think about the people that you have missed. You have probably missed patients who have appointments with doctors in the afternoon. You have missed patients that were admitted through emergency departments, and also patients whose appointment is on Tuesdays. And without realizing it, you only collected data from a small fraction of your population. And this is what we call a selection bias. Now, a selection bias simply means that some patients or participants had a better chance of being included in that study compared to others. Now, this is not because of random selection or random sampling. It is simply because they were there when you needed them. They were present when you were collecting your data. So this is why we say convenience sampling has limitations, and you must acknowledge those limitations. It is not bad, it only has limitations. Now let me paint a picture. Let's say you collected data from 100 patients who first visited the hospital on a Monday morning. Can you confidently say that those patients will represent the entire patients in that hospital? The answer is no, because many patients never had the chance of being included in that study. So this is why we say that convenience sampling has a limitation. This is the major limitation of using the technique. Now let's talk about when a convenience sampling is actually right for us to use. Because after everything we've said, you might be thinking, so should I not use convenience sampling at all? The answer is no. You just need to know when it is the appropriate technique to use. So let's look at 3 situations where convenient sampling technique makes sense. Now, the first situation where we can use a convenient sampling is when you are running a pilot study. Now, for example, you want to conduct a study, so you created a new questionnaire that you want to administer to your study participants. But first, maybe you want to know whether that questionnaire is clear enough, is understandable enough, or maybe you even want to run a reliability test on those questions. So it's easy for you to walk into a nearby hospital and ask maybe 20 patients to fill in your questionnaire just to get that data. That is perfectly reasonable because you are testing the questionnaire. You are not making a whole conclusion regarding the population, regarding the patient. You are just testing your questionnaire. So in this case, you can use a convenience sampling. Now, the second situation is when you are conducting an exploratory study. Now, sometimes we don't really know much about a research topic. So in that case, you can conduct an exploratory study because you're not trying to make a national conclusion. You're trying to identify a pattern that future research can investigate. Now, the first situation is when you have real constraints. Now, let me be realistic. Many student researchers have limited time, you don't really have money or limited access to your participants. So if you're facing constraints like this, you can actually use a convenience sampling. It is okay. The only thing is you have to acknowledge the limitations of this sampling. You shouldn't pretend the sample represents everyone. Now let's look at the opposite side. Let's look at the situations where convenience sampling is simply not the right choice for your study. The first one is, suppose you want to conduct a study to discover or to find out how many nurses experience burnout in Nigeria. So in this case, you cannot use a convenience sampling because it is a national study. You said nurses in Nigeria, so you cannot just walk into one hospital and ask nurses about their experiences or whether they are burnt out or not. Your sample is going to be too limited. So you have to sample nurses across Nigeria using the proper technique. Another example is maybe you want to compare nurses, the salary of nurses working in private hospitals and those working in public hospitals, and then you simply walk into one hospital just because it is closer to you. That would not actually be a fair comparison. So when you want to conduct a study with the aim of your findings to be generalizable, or you want to estimate a national figures, convenience sampling is simply not the best option for this kind of study. Now, I have a simple decision framework to help you decide whenever you are unsure whether convenience sampling is right for your study or not. So you are going to have to ask yourself 3 questions. And the first one is you want to ask yourself this question: do I intend to generalize my findings? So if your answer is yes, then convenience sampling is not the right choice for you. You have to use a different sampling technique. Now, if your answer is no, which means you don't intend to make a general conclusion about a population, ask yourself the second question, which is, am I conducting an exploratory study or a pilot study? So if the answer is yes, you can use convenience sampling, but if it is no, you want to consider another sampling technique, because this kind of studies that I just mentioned, we know that they have a genuine practical limitations. And the third question is, am I clearly willing to explain the limitations of my study? If the answer is yes, then convenience sampling might be a good choice. But if it is no, you need to look for a different sampling technique. Now, to justify a convenience sampling, one sentence is not enough. Don't just write a convenience sampling was used. You want to explain why, the why behind it. Why did you use a convenience sampling? And if you want to do that, if you really want to justify it, it should answer these 3 questions. So the first one is, why was the method chosen? Was it because you have a limited amount of time or money or any other limitation that is practical and reasonable? The second one is, you want to try to explain how the participants were recruited. You want to say everything in your chapter 3, and then at some point, sometimes you have to mention it in your chapter 5. That brought in some kind of limitation or some bias. And the third one is, what does this limitation introduce? Now, you want to clearly state that your findings may not be generalizable to other participants somewhere else. That strengthens your manuscript or your research project. Choosing the right sampling technique is just a one part of writing a good research project. But if you truly want to avoid some of the mistakes that students make from chapter 1 to chapter 5 while trying to conduct and to write their project, I've created a free playlist containing those videos. You can simply check it out right here. And I'll see you in my next video. Okay, bye.